Hi there, friends and adventurers. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of the fact that car camping and van life in general on the East Coast, and especially in Florida, has always been more challenging than other areas of the country. Well, that became even more true this past October when a new law went into effect here in Florida, commonly called the anti-homeless law, that was primarily targeted to prevent tent encampments and people sleeping on public streets, but it does apply to car camping as well in certain contexts. So we're going to talk about that today. I figured it was appropriate because we are on our way to a truck stop to spend the night after I make a fun little stop for myself first. And so I want to chat with you guys about it because there's a lot of misunderstanding, misconceptions, and confusion around this new law, understandably, and it does impact a lot of people. So once we get to our destination, we are going to talk about just that. Are you guys seeing the sky today? Woo! Okay, friends, I caught a beautiful sunset, hung out with some dolphins for a while, and now I am settled in at Love's, as you saw. I've got all my window covers up already, and I didn't do too much filming of that because I'm trying to be a little bit low-key here, which is also why I'm going to try to keep it down. So let's talk. Let's discuss this new law, HB 1365. If I find a link for the actual law with all of the verbiage and everything itself, I will link that in the description below. So check that out if you do want to know more. But it's actually being referred to by a lot of legal experts, which, disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. I am not a legal expert, but I have done a fair amount of research on this, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of it. And as I mentioned before, I've seen a lot of misinformation online about it. So I wanted to kind of clarify a few things and explain it a little bit more in detail. But as I was saying, it's actually being referred to by a lot of legal experts as one of the most restrictive anti-homeless laws in existence in the United States at the moment. And I've also noticed that the actual verbiage and wording is, in my opinion, intentionally vague and kind of lacks that black and white clarity as far as what exactly is allowed and what exactly is not. And like I said, I do think that is intentional, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. Let's discuss the actual law and what it says. To sum up in a nutshell, HB 1365, it basically prohibits any public camping or sleeping. So any public parks, sidewalks, streets, etc. It does not pertain to private property or established campgrounds that already permit camping in your vehicle or camping in a tent, etc. So let's go into that a little bit further. It does not only prohibit shelterless sleeping, for instance, like sleeping on a sidewalk or a park bench, or sleeping in tents, but camping is also considered sleeping in your vehicle overnight, or really any type of temporary shelter that is not specifically designed to sleep in. So basically anything other than a permanent structure like a house, a condo, an apartment, etc. So it also pertains to RVs, campers, any kind of vehicle, and so on. The law does also allow for and stipulate that governments have the right to create homeless camps if shelters are already at capacity. So ideally, they're supposed to provide resources and direct you to shelters. Well, ideally is kind of subjective here, but you see what I'm saying. Which is as the case in most, if not all, shelters in Florida at the moment, capacity is very often reached or exceeded. And unfortunately, this law does not really provide any additional funding except very, very minimal to put those into place. So that will definitely have to be a bridge that cities and counties have to cross when they start getting to it, which will probably be very soon now that as of January 1st, this law has become much more enforceable. This new law also allows both residential private homeowners and business owners to file civil suit against municipalities, cities, counties, if they do permit public camping. So I do unfortunately think that more businesses and more places may start to prohibit overnight parking where they previously allowed it. But again, that has not started happening yet. And going back to the vague kind of unclear wording in a lot of the law, that does leave a lot of it open to interpretation by law enforcement and the courts to kind of make their own determinations. So I do think a lot of this is going to end up being tested in courts, and that may determine the future direction. But for now, it's so vague that potentially law enforcement could even consider somebody that just has a blanket and a pillow in their car, even for like a quick nap. They could, if they pulled you over or stopped you or, encountered you for parking in a place that they thought potentially that you were overnight camping in where it wasn't allowed, they could technically say, look, you've got a blanket and a pillow in your car. You were intending to camp here. You have to leave. Now, a lot of public places in Florida and rest stops particular already limit that and have for years to less than 3 hours of parking. So it's not like suddenly rest areas are going to stop letting you rest there, but I do think they're going to get a lot more strict in how long people are parking in those areas. In the past, it's been kind of a little more loosely enforced, except for in really high tourist areas like on the coast and, places like that. So that is something to be aware of. But again, that's not new. Rest areas have been limited for years in Florida to a maximum of 3 hours of parking. So what is not subject to this new law? As I mentioned briefly, that would be private property or places like established campgrounds that already permit you to park and sleep overnight. I do want to be clear when I mention places like state parks, county parks, city parks, and places like that. That does not mean that if they do have camping there that you're automatically allowed to park overnight. You would have to be in one of the registered or established campsites to be okay to sleep in your vehicle. Which does bring me to a point that I see a ton of misinformation about online. And that is the fact that car camping is flat out illegal anywhere in Florida. You have to have a decoy tent with you, which if you're not already aware, people refer to decoy tents as car campers or people that sleep in their vehicles but have kind of a pop-up tent that they can quickly put up so that it looks like they're meeting the requirement of tent camping at places that don't allow it. You do not automatically have to have a tent with you, and it is not a blanket statement that you are not allowed to sleep in your vehicle. I see all the time people telling others that, nope, Florida state parks do not allow you to sleep in your car, and that's just not true. As a matter of fact, I'll insert a screenshot here of the drop-down options when you are reserving a Florida state park campsite that even let you select that your camping equipment will be a truck, SUV, or van. So you are allowed to sleep in your vehicle. It's just very important that you read the fine print. As a general rule of thumb, pretty much every single Florida state park and national park does allow you to camp in your vehicle. As I said, it's an option when you're reserving, and there is nothing in the fine print that says it's prohibited. Now, there are some exceptions. There are some RV-only sites and tent-only sites in Florida. The tent-only sites are normally those that you have to kind of walk into versus driving up to your site. But for the most part, any standard campsite in Florida state parks does allow you the option to sleep in your vehicle. On another note, private businesses. So for example, that would be like Cracker Barrel parking lots, Walmart parking lots, Planet Fitness. If those are on private property or privately owned, which the majority of them are, and if they already permit you to park overnight. Here in the Southeast, the most common example is Cracker Barrel for the most part, and of course there are exceptions to this. Most Cracker Barrels do allow you to sleep overnight, which is also why it's very important to be a responsible camper if you are utilizing these spaces, as far as not littering, not dumping human waste in the parking lot, not setting up camp outside, being overly obvious, leaving your place, your parking space better or the same as how you arrived. Those types of things will be more likely to allow businesses to continue permitting campers to park there overnight when needed. But for the most part, these are private businesses, and if they do permit you to stay overnight there, you are not subject to the law because it's allowed and it's not public property. So those places, as long as they continue to permit parking overnight, are fine, and you are safe to continue doing that. Of course, when in doubt, you can always ask the managers or the people on staff when you get there if it's okay, if you're not sure. Definitely be mindful of any signs prohibiting, things like that. But for the time being, those places are still acceptable options here in the state of Florida. Now, the implications, as I mentioned briefly, of this law may be, especially if overnighters continue to abuse the rights, or I should say the privilege, that these business owners have extended to us, it is very possible and even likely that more and more of these private businesses are not going to allow it anymore, especially now that they have this law to fall back on, and especially as more and more pressure happens from surrounding communities. So again, very important to be responsible and mindful of these things when you stay at places like this. It is unfortunately even possible that campgrounds that do permit camping in your vehicles may decide, you know what, more and more places are not allowing it. There may be other implications here. Let's start prohibiting it as well. But again, that's theoretical. And as long as we continue to be mindful, ethical car campers, we will hopefully not see more and more places starting to restrict this. So to sum up really quickly here, because I am again trying to keep it down and be low key here, because I don't want to contribute to making this problem any worse for people by my noise and distractions here. Where can you and where can you not sleep in your vehicle or RV or camper, etc. here in Florida now? Well, because of this new law, the HB 1365, you can no longer, technically it was never allowed, but now it's illegal. You can no longer sleep on public property, public benches, sidewalks, public parks, basically anywhere, public streets, anywhere that camping is not allowed, you cannot be. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole stealth factor. And as it stands currently, as far as enforcement goes, it seems like the first line of enforcement is basically just to say, hey, you can't be here. Do you have somewhere else to go? Go be there. So, worst case scenario for most people who are not breaking other laws or being disruptive or combative are basically just going to get the knock and told, you got to go. So, do with that what you will. But rest areas, a no-go for more than 3 hours. Again, with the disclaimer of the whole stealth factor and being asked to move on. It's not like they're going to immediately arrest you and throw you in jail because you were somewhere where you're not supposed to be. Now, you may get trespassed, and then if you're there again, that's another story. But again, not a lawyer. I'm not offering legal advice. I am just saying the law. So, rest areas, no, other than for resting a couple hours. Public spaces, public streets, no. And even on residential streets, again, residents now have the right to file civil suit. So I do think that those are going to be a lot more strictly enforced too, if you're standing out and, being obvious that you're there. Now, where can you camp and sleep overnight in your vehicle still? In summary, any place where it's already permitted. So private property such as parking lots like Cracker Barrel, truck stops, Walmart, etc. As long as it is permitted and not already prohibited with signage, etc., you're still safe to camp there for the most part. Again, all of this is dependent on location. Some locations are starting to crack down or prohibit it. Now, there are places like Love's, for instance, the Love's that I'm at tonight, does have signs up saying 1 hour customer parking. I did look online, and places like iOverlander, RV Parky still have very recent reviews saying it was permitted, no problem, had no issues. So again, if you're in doubt, you can always ask. But for the most part, places like truck stops, Cracker Barrel parking lots, etc., are still safe to overnight at as long as it's not strictly prohibited already. Also, campgrounds, state park, county park, national park, city park, as long as it's already permitted and there is nothing stating, nope, you cannot sleep in your vehicle here. For instance, I have been at city and county campgrounds before that clearly state in the fine print. You kind of have to look for it, but it does say in black and white, you are not allowed to sleep in your vehicle. You must have a tent, a trailer, a camper, a conversion van, etc. So make sure you're doing your research. But state parks, national parks, I have not booked one where it's been prohibited here in Florida. So as long as it's already allowed and does not strictly prohibit, you're fine to camp in your vehicle. No decoy tent needed, no stress, no having to be sneaky, none of that. So I hope this helps. I know it was a short, sweet video, but again, trying to be low key because don't want to contribute to the problem. I hope it kind of gave you a little more clarity, a little more peace of mind, and a little more understanding of what you can and cannot do in Florida when it comes to sleeping in your vehicle or other rig overnight here. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have any other tips, feedback, information that you would like to share, please do so in the comments. And I cannot wait till my next car camping video because I just scored an amazing site with an amazing view. So make sure you stick around for that, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.